All right, so let's get ready to segue into the next portion of this. So with the Belichick snub, it brings us to a larger discussion on Hall of Fame, right? Um, Other leagues seem to do fine with this. You don't hear about any controversy with the NHL or, tennis players, basketball. It just seems to be the National Football League and Major League Baseball that have these issues. Certainly, with baseball, the big sticking point is that whole steroid era and, some of the cheating, the alleged cheating that has taken place in Major League Baseball. But we have an interesting scenario with this next class for Major League Baseball, where Carlos Beltran has been elected to the Hall of Fame, but he was a part of that Houston Astros team that was accused of sign stealing through their little run through Major League Baseball, where they were able to win multiple World Series. In terms of the NFL, you both brought up examples earlier, where guys like T.O. and Moss were kind of shut out for a while and wasn't really based on any on the field stuff. So, you still have all of these people who either got a hard path to the Hall of Fame, specifically in the NFL, and those who are still being shut out in baseball, like Barry Bonds, McGuire, Canseco, those type of people. Do you think that Hall of Fame voters are letting the narratives and personal opinions that they have shape who they vote for and elect into the Hall of Fame a little bit too much, instead of, you mentioned it earlier, G, that it was a vague definition, but that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. What did you accomplish within the sport? Are they getting too much into the personal pettiness of their selections? And I'll start with you, big dude, on this.
Well, I guess we talked about football, so maybe I'll start with baseball. It just seems like the different eras over different times, once players got a black eye, so to speak, or was threatened to give baseball a black eye, that carried all the way through, and as we know, as you said about the steroid era, and it's interesting because if you talk about Barry Bonds and you talk about McGuire, you talk about Sammy Sosa, is it anything that they did or anything that they supposedly did? I remember Mark McGuire saying that he did take creatine. Now, creatine was not, it wasn't illegal, but it was immoral, and baseball has this morality clause. It sounds like this morality clause, more than almost anything, is what is very subjective and what is very broad and nebulous, if you ask me. Nobody knows exactly. So if somebody got arrested, or if someone got suspended, like we had a gentleman, and he wasn't as good of a pitcher from the Dodgers. Gosh, I forgot his name from the Dodgers. Suspended 7 times. You get suspended from baseball 7 times, you get thrown out. I understand that. That's beyond a black eye. That's somebody that was not going to even contribute to the league. But because of an era that you gave the game a black eye, then years later, we're not so sure if it is a black eye. Because not only can you not prove it, we haven't seen players like that since, that were able to do things later in their career because it doesn't make any sense. So everybody wants to do their cherry picking, and for the longest time, people did that. The question is, why is there Carlos Beltran? Why are they so forgiving to him? What's different about baseball where they're forgiving the folks from Houston who did win championships, who added to what was going on? Houston used to be in the National League, then it got switched to the American League. All of a sudden, they're power. So who is it that they be taken away from? It just makes no sense. You got people breaking home run records and all kind of other things. And I think that when you start talking about who gives it a black eye, the question is it the players through the era, or is it the way that the era was colored by the media.
So big dude. So what are you saying? Are you saying that the voters are letting their personal opinions and narrative shape how they vote?
No doubt. They no doubt are, because when you start talking about, what people supposedly did, they're filling in all the gaps, and they don't even know why the gaps even got created. And we know about, when you talking about the media relationships with Bill Belichick, Barry Bonds hated the media. There were people like Barry Bonds, Steve Carlton from the Phillies. He never talked to the media. He never wanted to, and he didn't care what it was he had to suffer from it. And guess what? People don't forget that.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it.
Okay, G, what about you?
I guess without burying the lead, I do believe that voters do let the narratives and opinions impact them because it's vague. Even in baseball, I think with all the writers, because they also vote because it's just pretty vague. And think about it. I mean, not even thinking about those situations where someone did some bad acting. We're constantly debating people's resumes and have opinions about what people or what we feel is more important or less important. And so that's happening amongst the media. They're the main ones who we hear talk about those things. So I definitely believe they're letting whatever their narrative is first about the statistics, and then you bring in whether or not there was bad acting. I definitely think that definitely comes into play.
I'm a little bit curious whether that morality clause in baseball was always a part of the selection criteria. And the reason I pose that is because, when you take Ty Cobb as a really good illustration
Oh,
in baseball, um, known for some off the field behavior and antics, um, I'm wondering if that morality clause is more or less being applied unfavorably to the modern day player in baseball specifically, since that's what we're talking about, if that's being applied a little bit unevenly, because how do you have that as a big part of your process when we can point to numerous people who are in Hall of Fame for baseball who were not of high character? So that's one of the things about baseball that really bothers me. The second point I want to make about baseball specifically, and then I'll get into overall what I think about what's happening in sports overall. The steroid era has always kind of bothered me in terms of people being omitted from the hall. And I always use Barry Bonds as an example. And you guys can debate me, correct me if I'm wrong about anything here. I always felt that Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer before the alleged transformation happened.
absolutely.
When we saw his body change and he got bigger, really fast, so on and so forth. He was already headed there. The other thing about baseball, to be that great of a hitter, you have to have some serious hand-eye coordination. Now, unless I'm wrong here, have you all seen anything where it says taking any of those substances can improve your hand-eye coordination? Now, I know it can make you hit a ball farther than you probably ever have, but I don't know anything about improving your hand-eye coordination.
Mhm.
Right? So that's always
No,
been my argument with that. And I feel like I would even compromise if you want to put an asterisk. I don't agree with it, but if you want to do that, knock yourself out. Same thing with Pete Rose. Come on, man. I mean, what are we talking about here? Go back to the Ty Cobb example. I don't know all the details, but from the things I've read, I wasn't around in that era, certainly. He done some things that might be on the level of some of the reasons that some of these guys have been kept out. So I'll leave that there with baseball. In terms of the other sports, I think these writers being so involved in the process, you can't tell me that they're not being petty when it comes to their selection. Some of them, the way they've treated some of the individuals who were up for it, the things they've said about them publicly, you can't make statements about people and your dislike for them and then have a vote and tell me that
Right.
you vote for them and it didn't impact your opinion, didn't impact your vote. You just can't tell me
Right.
that. And when you think about football, Randy Moss and T.O., as far as I know, I don't believe any of them has ever committed any type of crime. I don't think they've ever harmed anyone. People may not have liked their attitudes at different times or their effort, whatever the case may have been. But I didn't see anything that was so egregious that they needed to be punished and made
No,
to wait. That's why
absolutely not.
that's why I respect the fact that T.O. was like, that's great and I appreciate it, but I'll have my own ceremony over here and I'll catch you all later. So yeah, that's my thing with that. I think the voters are petty. I think the voters are super petty, and I think they were petty with Belichick. I heard some discussions this morning about there being more transparency in terms of how these selections are made.
There
G,
is or there should be.
that there should be. G,
Oh, okay.
do you think that there should be more transparency in terms of some type of rubric that the Hall of Fame uses to induct people? I mean, think about the definition you gave for being selected. Very vague. So how it's like somebody grade. How can you have a class? I'm grading you. You don't know what an A is, a B is, a C is. I'm just putting a letter on there, but you have no idea how I accumulated your points to get to that A, B, or C.
Right. Yeah, I think there should be, and it's because, and I'll say this for all the pro sports Hall of Fames, college halls of fame, it's because the meaning that they have, I think, is really really important. And I was watching some NFL YouTubers last night who are really talking about the meaning of the Hall of Fame, and if it's something that we're going to hold to that high a status and reverence, which we do as fans and as players, I'm sure coaches, whatnot, then yeah, I think that we should, in the best interest of the meaning of what does a Hall of Fame mean, that there should be something in their bylaws that's very, very specific, that anybody can go pull up that shows these are the things we consider. If they want to weight certain aspects, these how things are weighted. Something. But I also believe it should not be heavily, heavily, heavily. Well, I'll get to that. So yes, it should be transparent. There should be a rubric involved, I think, and letting us know exactly what the criterions are, what the criteria are.
All right. What about you, big dude?
And I think I would agree, like I said, and I know that, like I said, without trying to get ahead of myself, I think we ought to look at, again, the context of the time. I mean, so if we have some other people that have a chance to do well out of that steroid era, there's no way we're going to match anybody that has 70 home runs,
Yep.
or 73. I think the context of that era, and I think it should be significant. I mean, I'll say 5 to 7 years at least of this type of overachieving and what it means, because through eras, people have do different things. Like in the NFL, people, as you recall, it's interesting, and you all probably remember it. Some people would finish the season, some of the DBs, with 9, 10, 11 interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Now we see these guys with all these pass breakups. It's like one interception, and you got 14 pass breakups. He's an all-pro.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, hold on. That's what's interesting to me. I think somehow, and that's why players need to be more involved in it from a particular era when people are being considered, because the context of the game was different. So when you have somebody, and we go back as far as, and we talked about this before, Guru, when you go back as far as the 70s and you have somebody like Larry Wilson from the Cardinals, Larry Wilson, he was putting people out the games, he was hitting, but he had like 10 interceptions. Now, if you go fast forward, who's going to get 10 interceptions in a season? Ball's not really played that way because people are very worried about these guys that run 4.25 beating them. So, no, you ain't going to go in there. He used to tell you, go for the football. Everybody go for the football, get the interception. But then you don't want to look bad when somebody runs by you. So guess what? Get close enough and you can get a pass deflection, So I think it really, looking at the rubrics and context and all those other things, need to work in concert when you start talking about Hall of Fame of the, and what type of performance it is. For example, when you look and you see a linebacker like Mike Singletary, Mike Singletary, he might have more tackles than someone else in another era because there was a lot more running. They ran a 46 defense.
Yep.
So Singletary is just hitting gaps, and he's not thinking about. You see him on the video. He's telling you, I got him, and you see Dickerson. There's like two people that you got to worry about. Yep. Now you got linebackers
like Ray Lewis
that are slim, 230 pounds, 6'5".
Yep.
Yeah, 6'5". Then guess what? And that Tampa 2 coverage, they got to run the middle of the field. So they may not be impressive enough to have, you might not see anybody get 15 tackles in a game because defenses aren't designed to do that anymore. The same way with running backs. You don't have those guys that carry the ball 28 times a game because you got 4 running backs. Like New England has all those different players that they use. The Rams have the 2 running backs that they use. So nobody is, quote unquote, called a bell cow anymore.
Yo, I love that perspective. I love that perspective because then you need to really look at reevaluating that rubric as the game changes. Each offseason we change the rules, right? And this again across whatever sport. If you're changing the rules, then you need to reevaluate what that rubric looks like. How do you now qualify to the Basketball Hall of Fame if we now have a 3-point line?
Right.
We now have moved the 3-point line. So how do you qualify? Or now you can't hand check, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that, I think that's really a great point. I think both of your commentaries are spot on in terms of there being a necessity for a rubric and really how do you govern the changes in the game to make sure that that rubric is accurate and matches, how the game has changed.
Let me add something real quick before you move to the next piece.
Mm-hmm.
So just whenever you're ready.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So so Steph, kind of walked into one of my other notes where I was going to say I had an issue with the writers. And the more I thought about it, I don't have an issue with the writers if there is a rubric.
Mm-hmm.
But I also do believe, though, it definitely needs to be expanded to where it's not primarily writers.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of gets to what you were saying, Steph. So there are 4 categories of people that can be in the Hall of Fame. Modern era players. So I want to say that's those players that have been out of the game, maybe 10 years or so or less.
Gee, is this for a specific sport?
Something like that, huh?
Gee, is this for a specific sport that you're talking about, or is this overall?
Is NFL. This is just NFL right now. And then there are the senior players, been out 25 years or so in the NFL, coaches, and then those who impacted. So, like when I think Rooney was inducted, wasn't he? Yeah, and a big part of that I suspect was because the Rooney Rule that he advocated for really changed the coaching hiring to a degree, at least the approach. So that was important. And so that gets to what you say. Yeah, whether or not it's useful as intended is a whole other question. But Big Dude, it gets to what you were saying. To take a person who retired in the last 5, 10, 15 years, that's an era. And that's going to be different than 20, 25-year retiree. And so you do need people with that memory and that understanding of era nuances making those decisions. You do need other coaches. When you're evaluating coaches, who are some of the best people to evaluate a coach but another coach?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You're evaluating those who impact the game. Who other than other GMs, even other owners stepping back, players, in this instance I'm talking about NFL, the labor people, those evaluating how did this person impact the game. So I definitely think that when it comes to the choosers, it should be people who I would say, and I'm using air quotes, experts at the modern era. Experts at those who came earlier in the senior era. Experts in coaching. Experts in administration.
Yeah. And you making me think too that that list of senior players came up. What's the what rubric are we using then? Because this is the class, right? But you have these people who played 2030, like Roger Craig, for example, played in the 80s. I can't use the 2025 rubric to measure his candidacy for the Hall of Fame when the last time he may have played in the game was late 80s or early 90s.
Right.
Right.
That's a very good point. Very good point. And why wouldn't it, in anything else, we have peers deciding on their peers?
Right.
But with this, I mean, as a sports writer, how are you defining? I mean, I guess you have applied to be a part of their guild or whatever it is, but how is I would hope that they'd be more objective, but let's be real about it. Wouldn't there be a fine line between a fan, critic, and a writer?
Yeah.
I can see an analyst. Because there are some writers who write from an analyst perspective.
Exactly.
I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So yeah, this gets really murky. This is really murky. This isn't as clear cut as I even thought when we decided to go with this today. Thinking, oh, this would be pretty black and white, but man, this is not even a clear gray.
Yes.
Nope.
Very interesting.
I think Steph gave us the best example looking at DBs because I play fantasy. I don't know if you two play fantasy,
I do.
but but tackles, when you interrupt passes, all of those are important in fantasy, and I think it's just I think they've always been important for DBs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we focused on interceptions.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We focused on how many of them not intercepted or returned for a touchdown. We didn't focus on actual defense, which includes tackles and pass breakups. So you're right. It's just a different era of analytics.
Yeah, you're making me think of QBR that didn't exist back in the day.
Right.
A lot of ways players are evaluated that didn't exist previously. Interesting. All right. Well, this last question I want to pose to you all, this is really something that is heavy with me. How should character and off-field issues matter compared to on-field achievement? Big Dude, I'll start with you.
Well, again, we just came from not just a rubric, but I think it depends on whether you could stay in the game. If you're able to stay in the game and you're able to perform and you're able to do well and you're able to overcome what it is you're able to overcome. I don't know how many people we can talk about because, again, everything, again, from context and time, everything wasn't in the media, and we found out when people got done. I'm not so sure because somebody posts something on social media. It's the authentication about whether people got arrested. I think when you start talking about multiple things and the types of things that were going on, when you look at players that, because everybody asks, is gambling, is it better than drugs? Is it different than drugs? Or is this not as bad as drugs? Like you said, what did we think about? Like with Pete Rose, I think that the biggest part in all of it is are you going to be honest and above board with all those people? I put honesty above all those other types of things and your dealings in a situation. To me, it's not just a situation that you were in, but how you were able to come out of that situation, how you dealt with it, and how did you come out with that? So if you were involved with gambling, and we have the gambling things that are going on, and we'll talk about that on another show, those individuals that are involved, will they ever not be ready to be in Naismith Hall of Fame? Or will these people lose their spot in the Hall of Fame? So I think if we're talking about what a Hall of Fame, all the Hall of Fames, I think from a continuity standpoint, all of them should talk about the way they need to carry themselves once they get that gold jacket on in football. It needs to be about not just what happened with you in football. It's about also the rest of your life. Do you get to keep it? So I think character getting in is one thing. Maybe and you can overcome some things. How you went through it and what other side that you got on is fine. And then afterwards, how do you carry the distinction that you have as a Hall of Famer?
So before I turn it over to you, G, let me throw a sub question in there. So I'm the all-time leading. I'll make it simple. I'm the all-time leading running back.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a partier. I've been caught with drugs multiple times. I've been caught with guns multiple times. Domestic violence. Do you think I should be in the Hall of Fame? Do you think that should stop me from being in the Hall of Fame?
Well, again, those are, like I said, it's general questions. I think there are a lot of people who get accused. The question is, are you accused or every single time? This is what I'm saying. Some of these things happen as a result of social media.
I'm saying I've done it. It's proven that I've done it.
Yeah, I would say it would be very difficult for me to vote for you. Yes. I'm not so sure. Like I said, unless we're going to make a rule. If we make a rule about morality and you have done some things at that level, all being felonies, yeah, I don't see how you could represent the Hall of Fame. I don't see how you could. The question would be later though is who are you going to come? Is the league going to help you? Also, because you've helped them and made them look good in other ways, that they still use your name, still use your image, still use your likeness, even without that. That's the problem I have.
Well, most likely, with all of that on my resume, most likely they wouldn't be using my likeness for anything, I would imagine.
Michael Vick is back, and no one thought Michael Vick would be back.
All right, we could go there, but I'm not going to go there this episode because what I described as my resume, I do not compare to what Michael Vick did. But
right. Okay, well, if you're talking to that extreme, there's no way I'm going to vote for you. And I don't think that you're going to have less than 11 people that won't vote no. Now,
but I think you answered your own question too when you said when you brought up the Michael Vick example. To be quite honest, you had mentioned about did it prevent me from playing in the game? Did it take me out of the game? So he was punished. The NFL had his process and they reinstated him. So I think you kind of touched on that. So it would be a point on did I do enough where I was allowed back into the game, essentially.
Right. See, and there's where the morality, and to me, I think the NFL answers his own question also, or any other professional league. What do you think? Do you think they can represent the league the way they should? If you don't think that they should, then not only should they not be able to continue, that's the whole point. I think the fact that they can't continue takes care of whether they should be in the Hall of Fame or not. Anybody that was thrown out of the league, Steve Howe, that's the name of the pitcher from the Dodgers, suspended 7 times, and he died, I think, at like 49 years old. There's no way with 7 drug suspensions that you should be in the Hall of Fame or anybody should vote. But here's the problem, though, Guru. How could you let somebody back 7 times? How? You let them back 7 times. So that means, and guess what? Different era, smoke a little bit of pot in the late 70s, early 80s, maybe it's not so bad. But when you say drugs, and you're talking about selling things, and you're talking about, I can't think of the cornerback's name from the Rams that did all that jail. There's a guy that went to jail for 20 years. Is it Hanley? I can't remember his name, the cornerback.
I can't recall.
Huh? What's that, Jim?
We were saying we couldn't recall the name.
The cornerback, right? Not the quarterback, the cornerback.
Corner, yeah.
Daryl Henley.
Yeah, so it was Henley. Okay? So there's no way that Henley gets in the Hall of Fame. Henley's been out of the game, out of jail. That's what I'm saying. To me, it depends on, the league and whether the league is supporting that player to represent their interest ever again. And if you can't represent what the resume that you gave, you could not represent the interest of any league ever again.
Okay, I want to come back to this representing the league variable. I'm going to turn it over to you. Again, character off the field issues. Should that matter compared to on-field achievement? Should it keep you out? If you, like I said, were the best at your position or whatever, should that keep you out?
I kind of have a few thoughts on that. Similar to what Big Dude said, if you was basically a crime was considered things that are considered like straight criminal, I would definitely be okay with them not being eligible. Civil things or misdemeanors, I should say felonies, misdemeanors, civil issues. I probably would, because right now in some places, now marijuana possession, I think, is civil in some places.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Um, so no matter what your thoughts are, because different people still have different thoughts about marijuana, and so I think in those particular situations, I mean, they should be fine. Um, I'm thinking though, outside of the most egregious, felonies, if a person had to serve jail time or prison time or whatever, or maybe they're just not eligible for the time frame of the 5 years plus whatever they had to actually spend, incarcerated if they ended up incarcerated. Again, I'm not talking about for the most egregious felonies. That's not what I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about. But then I remember something just reading the about Canton, about the Hall of Fame. It's a museum. And so then I start thinking back. I'm like, well, what
Yeah.
have we
I like where
done?
you're going.
Huh?
I
What
like
have
where
we
you're
done with a
going.
lot of historical figures that did really, really good for our country? It may have been for a particular state, but they may have had some black eyes, and oftentimes both are discussed. So when you go see their exhibit, they did all this good, but they were human and they did do some bad things, and it's all there for everybody to see. It just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I landed and I said, well, since it's a museum, we already have a museum process for for some of our historical figures. If the NFL, since this is what we're talking about, decide to say, you know what, character we will include it is not to keep a person out, but since we're going to talk about we're going to talk about the character of all the inductees. We're going to include that too, be it good or bad. We will include it because it is a museum, and the
Yeah.
NFL is made up of humans and all of our infallibles or fallibles. I can't remember which one is that correct word. So that's kind of where I landed.
Whew, that's a drop the mic, G. I'm not gonna lie,
Woo.
bro. That's a drop the mic right there.
Hey, you can't touch it.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
And I do not disagree with you. I do not disagree with you. I want to come back to this, man. I would like to dig into that some more. I want to go back to this representing the league,
I
though,
knew you would.
because just because I'm in the Hall of Fame, I mean, it's correct me. Is that written someplace where I'm now an NFL representative? I'm just in here because I could run the rock. I thought. I didn't
Right.
know that I needed to go do a Gatorade joint for you, even though I'm 70. I'm not really a face of your league anymore. So the question I will pose then, big dude, are you saying if I do something after I got my gold jacket, because I think you mentioned this, that it can be stripped from me?
Well, what I'm saying is to go further, you had talked about what some of the things are for people to get in, and we start talking about rubrics and I guess as long as we're talking morality clauses, to me, a morality clause, there's continuity in it. When you become somebody, now it has nothing to do with anybody judging anybody per se, but this is back to what you were saying. When you get invited and you're in the Hall of Fame, is it just about you being able to run the rock? And I guarantee you that people that vote for people aren't going to be just because they run the rock. There are going to be some people that split off like, one big example, and no, he didn't get the Hall of Fame taken away. But when you Google him and you look at his Wikipedia with Jim Brown, let me tell you something. Half of it is about football, but the other half talks about his treatment of women. A lot is on there.
I'm agreeing with you what you're saying, but is my Hall of Fame getting taken away? Is what I'm asking you. I'm already in. I'm already in.
I think I think that it needs to be looked into, or there needs to be something that has to do corrective, where you do something that at least you're separated and you get a chance to get it back. That's the way that I see it, because it's becoming too commonplace about who's in. Now, that doesn't mean that there's people that are in that are causing problems. I'm talking about, to me, that's big dude. That's how far you take it. You run the rock, but when you're running the rock, you never stop running the rock. That's what I say. Everybody's All-American. But who's everybody's All-American supposed to be?
I'm not. I can't agree with that at all.
No, and that's what I'm saying. And I'm glad that we're having that discussion. But what I'm talking about is the value of what the Hall of Fame is supposed to be. To me, it's just not getting in. It's about where you take it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that, hey, that I expect somebody to mess up. I'm just telling you, to me, that's how serious it is to get somebody else in there. And to be accused of something is one thing. Like I said, with Spygate, I talked about that earlier. To be accused of something and you're going through it, hey, stop it. It's all over. We've all done that. We've survived it. And Jim Brown, he did it. He went through it. He survived it. Everybody didn't know everything then.
I mean, I see both sides. I certainly see both sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
While I'm a player, I know I represent the league. I wouldn't argue that. It's just like us at our employers. No matter what your job is, you do represent your organization.
Yeah.
But when I'm done with that, and when I leave work, I'm no longer my organization. And maybe it's not the best analogy, but I'm in the Hall of Fame. I'm done. My career is long gone. 20 years since I've been elected into the Hall of Fame. I guess I just look at it as something that I may do after that, a mistake that I may make. Shoot, if it's a huge mistake, if I end up in jail afterwards, I don't see what that has to do with my being Hall of Fame still. And especially going back to what G said about, hey, maybe that gets added to the notes by my statue. Yeah, he killed somebody in 2026.
Right.
Well, the NFL Hall of Fame would agree with you, Guru.
Say it again.
The NFL Hall of Fame would agree with you in that if someone does something egregious once inducted, they're not removing that person. OJ is still in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So they're not taking anything from it because to them, this is about what you did on the field and you did this stuff afterwards. It is what it is. So and so when you ask the question about does being inducted mean you represent the NFL, I don't think the legal sense as an employee. I don't think it doesn't. You don't represent just because you're in the Hall of Fame. You're in the museum. You're not working for the NFL anymore. But I do believe socially you are representative because you're in there. People are going to see you. They associate you with the game. Even though it's historical, they still associate you with it. There will be some assumptions made because you're in the Hall of Fame about who you may be, because especially if you go back and watch all the glazing that you receive once you're determined that you are an inductee, and all this good stuff comes out about you. So I think socially you are representative, but formally you're not.
I'd agree with that. I'm going to go back to, I'm actually going to make a point for you, big dude.
Okay.
It made me think of the Heisman House.
Oh,
I love that.
The commercial.
Right? Because a lot of the older cats in there now, right? And they're throwing them in the commercials because it's still representative of NCAA football, of what the Heisman Trophy represents. So I definitely think that that's a good argument to support.
But they're working for the NCAA in that context, though.
Yes. And for me, I just feel like I would be more comfortable if you just made a footnote by my statue. I don't feel like all of a sudden I'm not Hall of Fame worthy, unless morality is, we know baseball, they claim morality, but if morality, let's say if we're talking NFL Hall of Fame, if morality is part of being in there, I could see that, but I just don't know after the fact.
Whose morality?
From you. Say it again.
Whose morality? I personally don't care if a person wants to let's say if they want to do drugs. I don't care. That's your decision if you want to do it.
And that's separating the art from the artist, right?
Yeah, I'm like, so whose morality, when you say morality, whose definition of character? It becomes
There
just
is
as vague as just saying you are the best that the game had to offer. All of that is kind of vague stuff, and that's not. I'm trying not to be legalistic, but y'all know my ground.
yeah, there's
But
subjectivity there for sure. Like, do we?
Yeah.
so
Let's look at that for a second. We all like T.O. and Randy Moss, or no?
Yes.
yeah,
Would we want them out of the Hall of Fame?
no.
No, not
Would
necessarily.
we want them representing the NFL?
Yes. I think at the end. See, and again,
Now, yes.
this is what I'm saying. At the end, we know a little bit more what's going on, and I'm beyond what
Mhm.
shows people are on and all that other kind of stuff. But those are, I think, two good examples that some people let certain things go. But then my question really is, in the NFL, what did they really do? I mean, I think early on they were vexed.
Mhm.
So people, and that's what I'm saying. I don't think that people should be vexed the whole time. And that was my point about Belichick, about what, and OJ was another perfect example, G. Everybody is vexing OJ, and this is the truth, for what they think he did.
Right.
I mean,
Wow.
we went through
Right.
all that
Of
stuff
course,
and
you know what he later did, and I think it was in Vegas, selling
they
some
think
memorabilia.
that OJ did, and to them it's obvious that he did it. They said,
Yeah.
of course he did it. Who else? And those were the arguments we used to have in the office, and then when the whole thing is over,
But see,
uh,
Steph, here's the
people are
thing.
exploding. Then he gets in trouble for something else. Yeah, but then people are putting the two things together. The one thing he really did and went to jail for, to the one thing he supposedly did and didn't go to jail for.
Right.
Yeah. See, to me, it's what I mean. I'm not talking about that. That's not what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start talking about footnote, like you say, Guru, that's what I'm saying. People can put whatever footnote they want on any of my stuff.
And does the
That's
footnote
fine.
even need to go in there? Most of the
No,
people who were sharing,
I don't think
most
so.
most of the
I
people
think
who
it
were
should.
sharing,
If you're gonna use character, if character
most
is a part of your decision. Well, see, again, I go back. I look at it as a museum, so I think everybody should have a discussion of character on their placard somewhere, talking about how good of a person they were and everything, and the community service that they did. And then if somebody crossed the legal line or crossed a serious policy line, you put it all there. It lets those kids know that you can that you are a human being, and there are things you don't want to do this, but if you do it, you can come back from it.
the
Hopefully,
re- the reason I
um,
posed that with OJ is because there's a generation of folks that didn't even know he was a football player. That's where we're
No, they don't even know who
approaching
he
now.
is.
yeah.
So does it go into foot? I'm not saying it shouldn't go into football footnote, but some people be like, "Oh, I didn't even know he played football." I mean,
Right,
that's
right.
For
you know,
everybody, as long as
Yeah,
there's a character statement for everybody, then I would say yes. I
you
don't think.
see, this is what I'm saying. Right now, in all those Hall of Fames, is inconsistent baseball, who I think is the most hypocritical
I
of
agree.
all the three,
I
has a
agree.
nerve to have a morality clause. You go
I
back to
agree.
Ty Cobb and all those other folks, and people, even Babe Ruth, he was receiving racial slurs because people still believe that he was black. I don't know anything about that. And what does that matter? They're saying, who was the first black player? Was it Jackie Robinson? No, it was Babe Ruth. Did you see
Stop
his
it.
lips?
Stop it. Stop,
Yeah, yeah. And he was one of the first ones to be called an epithet on the field.
stop
And
it.
modern, and most modern, as the 27 Yankees, they called him some stuff.
Stop
Babe
it.
Ruth.
Yeah, they thought he was black. People were still convinced.
Wow.
As you would say, big dude, kind of heavy.
Yeah.
Anybody, I think this was a really good discussion. I think we can perhaps continue it. As we see how this class pans out, because if Robert Kraft gets in, we can definitely have another conversation
Oh,
about this. But any closing remarks from either of you? G, I'll start with you first.
A question we didn't get to, but I actually think is a good one. Should rings and championships outweigh individual accolades? And I would just say no. I just think that they should be evaluated in their context. in the current context of the Hall of Fame. So I think both should be included.
Any closing remarks, big dude?
I will second to what G said. I think the rings are important. I think the rings are but I think they are an intangible. I think they are an intangible when deciding certain things that are involved. But then I just want to say, in terms of Eli Manning coming up short, I mean, Eli Manning did get 2 Super Bowls, and we saw what he was able to do. You know, some people never forgave him leaving San Diego when they were San Diego Chargers, Superchargers. Okay, and then going to the Giants and winning 2 Super Bowls, 11th all-time in career passing, 11th all-time in career yards and TD. And guess what, though? All that stuff he did with the Giants, guess what? His record with the Giants was 117 and 117. This is my point, G. And guess what? He led the NFL in picks 3 different times. Now, do we add all those other things? You know, there's where you have the rings when you start to outweigh it. It's an intangible, but does that outweigh him having a very pedestrian win-loss record? In fact, 50%. And you lead the league in picks 3 times. What washes out the other? I don't think the rings are as important. And I say he'll get in when it's time because of that.
And I'll end, and people who are close to me will laugh when they hear this. You can't spell elite without Eli.
Okay. And my Giants, and I apologize, Giants fans, but it'll be his time.
And on that note, thank you for joining us again on Chasing Rings. Please be sure to subscribe and follow us on all the major streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Amazon Music. And until next time, people, see ya later.